Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Lee wished to renew the attack on Friday the 3rd, using the same basic plan as the previous day. Longstreet would attack the left, Ewell attack Culp's Hill. However, before Longstreet was ready, Union 12th Corps troops started a dawn artillery bombardment against the Confederates on Culp Hill in an effort to regain a portion of their lost works.
right.
The Confederates attacked, and their second fight for Culp's Hill ended around 11 a.m. after some 7 hours of bitter combat.
Wow.
Holy shit. The Union line was intact and held more strongly than before, they say.
My goodness.
Uh-oh.
Well, then Lee was forced to change his very plans.
Yeah, you better.
Longstreet would command Pickett's Virginia Division of his own First Corps, plus 6 brigades from Hill's Corps, in an attack on the Union Second Corps position at the right center of the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. Prior to the attack, all the artillery the Confederacy would bring to bear on the Union positions would bombard and weaken the enemy's line, they hoped.
Hopefully, right?
Much had been made over the years of General Longstreet's objection to General Lee's plan. In his memoirs, Longstreet states that he told Lee that there were not enough men to assault the strong left center at the Union line by McLaws and Hood's divisions, reinforced by Pickett's brigades. He's like, this just simply not enough.
Well, he thought the attack would be repulsed, and a counterattack would put Union forces between the Confederates and the Potomac. Longstreet wrote that he said it would take a minimum of 30,000 men to attack successfully, as well as close coordination with other Confederate forces.
Right.
He noted that only about 13,000 men were left in the selected divisions after the first 2 days of fighting.
Jeez, that's not
They would have to walk a mile under heavy artillery and long-range musketry fire. Longstreet states that he further asked Lee the strength of a column. He stated 15,000. He being Lee. Opinion was then expressed by Longstreet, by me, he says, I'm assuming, that the 15,000 men who could make successful assault over that field had never been arrayed for battle, but he was impatient of listening and tired of talking, and nothing was left but to proceed.
He knew he was screwed, and they were
We
here.
gotta do something, dude. And we're not backing down.
Around 1 p.m., 150 to 170 Confederate guns began an artillery bombardment that was probably the largest of the war. In order to save valuable ammunition for the infantry attack that they knew would follow, the Army of Potomac's artillery, under command of Brigadier General Henry Hunt, at first did not return any fire. After waiting about 15 minutes, about 80 Union cannons opened fire. The Army of Northern Virginia from the south was critically low on artillery ammo, and the cannonade did not significantly affect the Union position at all, because they never do. They're so stupid. Waste.
Well, let's see. Now here is Lee making a big blunder, because he believed that after Confederate attacks on both the left and right flanks of the Union lines on July 2nd, Meade would concentrate his defenses there to detriment of his center. However, the night of July 2nd, Meade correctly predicted to General Gibbon, after a council war, that Lee would attack the center of his lines the following morning and reinforce that area with additional soldiers and artillery.
Clearly, it's common sense.
Right. The infantry assault was preceded by a massive artillery bombardment that was meant to soften up the Union defense and silence artillery, but it was largely ineffective.
Damn right it was. There goes a good one. Pickett's charge was planned for 3 Confederate divisions commanded by Major General George Pickett, Brigadier General Pettigrew, and Major General Isaac Trimble, consisting of troops from Lieutenant Longstreet's First Corps and Lieutenant General A.P. Hill's Third Corps. Pettigrew commanded brigades from Major General Henry Heth's Old Division under Colonel Burkett Fry, which is Archer's Brigade, Colonel James Marshall, Pettigrew's Brigade, Brigadier General Joseph R. Davis, Colonel John Brockenbrough, Trimble commanding Major General Dorsey Pender's division, had the brigades of Brigadier General Alfred Scales, temporarily commanded by William Lee Lawrence. That's a hell of a way to spell Lawrence.
All right.
And James H. Lane. 2 brigades from Major General Richard Anderson's division, which is Hill's Corps, were to support the attack on the right flank. Brigadier General Cadmus Wilcox and Colonel David Lang, also from Perry's brigade.
Okay, a lot going on there. The target of the Confederate assault was the center of the Union of the Second Corps, commanded by Major General Winfield Hancock. Directly in the center was the division of Brigadier General John Gibbon, with the brigades of Brigadier General William Harrow, Colonel Norman J. Hall, and Brigadier General Alexander Webb. To the north of this position were brigades from the division of Brigadier General Alexander Hayes, and to the south was Major General Abner Doubleday's division of the First Corps, including the 2nd Vermont Brigade of Brigadier General George Stannard and the 121st Pennsylvania, under the command of Colonel Chapman Biddle.
Hey.
Meade's headquarters were just behind the Second Corps line in the small house owned by the widow Lydia Leicester.
Yeah.
Lydia Leicester.
Well, the very specific objective of the assault has been the source of historical controversy. Traditionally, the copse of trees on Cemetery Ridge has been cited as the visual landmark for the attacking force. Historical treatments such as the 1993 film Gettysburg continue to popularize this view, which originated in the work of Gettysburg battlefield historian John Bachelder in the 1880s. However, though, recent scholarship, including published works by some Gettysburg National Military Park historians, has suggested that Lee's goal was actually Ziegler's Grove on the Cemetery Hill, a more prominent and highly visible grouping of trees about 300 yards north of the Cubs.
Yeah.
It's probably one of them.
Right. The much debated theory suggests that Lee's general plan for the second day attacks, which was the seizure of Cemetery Hill, had not changed on the third day, and the attacks on July 3rd were also aimed at securing the hill and the network of roads it commanded. The copse of trees, currently a prominent landmark, was under 10 feet high in 1863. That's it. Only visible to a portion of the attacking columns from certain parts of the battlefield. From the beginning of the planning, things went awry for the Confederates.
Sure it did. Pickett's division had not been used yet at Gettysburg. A.P. Hill's health became an issue, and he did not participate in selecting which of his troops were to be used for the charge. Why, I'm sure he can still think.
Right.
Some of Hill's corps had fought lightly on the 1st of July and not at all on 2nd of July. However, troops that had done heavy fighting on the 1st of July ended up making the charge.
What a bunch of idiots.
Right. Although this all is known popular history as Pickett's charge, overall command was given to James Longstreet, and Pickett was one of his divisional commanders. It was. Lee did tell Longstreet that Pickett's fresh division should lead the assault, so the name is appropriate, although some recent historians have used the name Pickett Pettigrew Trimble Assault, or less frequently Longstreet's Assault. Never heard of that.
No.
So they can fairly distribute the credit or the blame, which is mostly blame.
Yes.
No credit to this.
Right. With Hill sidelined, Pettigrew's and Trimble's division were delegated to Longstreet's authority as well. Thus, Pickett's name has been lent to a charge in which he commanded 3 out of the 11 brigades while under the supervision of his corps commander throughout.
Right.
So it's not even his charge.
No.
Pickett's men were almost exclusively from Virginia, with the other divisions consisted of troops from North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. The supporting troops under Wilcox and Lang were from Alabama and Florida. In conjunction with the infantry assault, Lee planned a cavalry action in the Union rear. Major General Jeb Stuart led his cavalry division to the east, prepared to exploit Lee's hoped-for breakthrough by attacking the Union rear and disrupting its lines of communication and retreat along the Baltimore Pike. Okay. So now Stuart's finally getting some action in.
All right. Well, Lee planned for an early start. It took all morning to arrange the infantry assault force, though.
Jeez.
Neither Lee's nor Longstreet's headquarters sent orders to Pickett to have his division. Why? Did you guys?
Hey, we're doing this assault, but we're not going to let you know when to put you guys on the battlefield.
Wait, they're not in the battlefield? We didn't get, what
do you mean? You didn't tell them Longstreet? I thought you were supposed to tell them.
Wow. Historian Jeffrey D. Wirt blames oversight on Longstreet, describing it either as a misunderstanding of Lee's oral order or a mistake. How? These guys are like in sync with each other.
Should be.
Some of the many criticisms of Longstreet's Gettysburg performance by the postbellum Lost Cause authors cite this failure as evidence that Longstreet deliberately undermined Lee's plan for the battle.
Maybe he did.
Was there some kind of a little drama there?
Must have been.
Meanwhile, on the far right end of the Union line, a 7-hour battle raged for the control of Culp's Hill.
7 hours.
Lee's intent to synchronize his offensive across the battlefield, keeping Meade from concentrating his numerically superior forces, but the assaults were poorly coordinated, and Major General Edward Johnson's attacks against Culp's Hill petered out just as Longstreet's cannonade began. So bad, dude. How can you go to your biggest battle and then just fall apart? That happens usually it's the Union doing
that. Well, I don't know. The Union
they've been better.
Stepped up on the bigger battles.
Right.
But,
what the hell?
Well, the infantry charge was preceded by what Lee would hope to be a powerful and well-concentrated cannonade of the Union center, destroying the Union artillery batteries that could defeat the assault and demoralizing the Union infantry. But a combination of inept artillery leadership and a defective equipment doomed the barrage from the beginning. Longstreet's corps artillery chief, Colonel Edward Porter Alexander, had effective command of the field. Lee's artillery chief, Brigadier General William Pendleton, played little role other than to obstruct the effective placement of artillery from the other two corps. Despite Alexander's efforts, then there was insufficient concentration of Confederate fire on the objective.
So stupid.
What the hell are these guys doing?
The 3rd of July bombardment was likely the largest of the war, with hundreds of cannons from both sides firing along lines for 1 to 2 hours. Starting around 1 p.m., Confederate guns numbered between 150 and 170 and fired from a line over 2 miles long. Starting with the south at Peach Orchard and running roughly parallel to the Emmitsburg Road. Confederate Brigadier General Evander Law wrote, "The cannonade in the center presented one of the most magnificent battle scenes witnessed during the war. Looking up the valley towards Gettysburg, the hills on either side were capped with with crowns of flame and smoke as 300 guns, about equally divided between the two ridges, vomited their iron hail upon each other.
Despite its ferocity, the fire was mostly ineffectual.
Of course, it always is.
Right. Confederate shells often overshot the infantry front lines, in some cases because of inferior shell fuses that delayed detonation.
Right.
And the smoke covering the battlefield concealed the fact from the gunners. Right, so I don't even know where they're shooting.
Right.
Union Artillery Chief Brigadier General Henry Hunt had only about 80 guns available to conduct counter battery fire. The geographic features of the Union line had limited areas for the effective gun emplacement. He also ordered that firing cease to conserve ammo, but to fool Alexander, Hunt ordered his cannons to cease fire slowly to create the illusion that they were being destroyed by one by one. Oh, right. So he's like, boom, every so often, stop firing. That way, like, we got one, boys. Wow, look at this.
By the time all of Hunt's cannons ceased fire and still blinded by the smoke from the battle, Alexander fell for Hunt's deception and believed that many of the Union batteries had been destroyed. Hunt had to resist the strong arguments of Hancock, who demanded Union fire to lift the spirits of the infantrymen pinned down by Alexander's bombardment. He's like, don't worry, I got this. Follow me, man. Follow me on this.
We got it.
Even Meade was affected by the artillery. The Leicester house was a victim of frequent overshots, and he had to evacuate with his staff to Powers Hill. The counter battery fire depleted the northern ammunition stocks, leaving them insufficient time to replenish before a southern assault. For the rest of his life, Hunt always maintained that he had been allowed to do what he'd intended, saved his long-range shells for the attack he knew was coming, then bombard from the Confederate forces with every gun available once they lined up for their advance. Then the charge would never have happened and saved many Northern lives. He's like, if they let me do what I want to do,
that Pickett's charge would have never happened. But the first day was hot, or the day was hot, 87 degrees by one account, and humid. And the Confederates suffered under the hot sun and from the Union counter battery fire as they awaited the order to advance. When Union cannoneers overshot their targets, they often hit the massed infantry waiting in the woods of Seminary Ridge or in the shallow depressions just behind Alexander's guns, causing significant casualties before the charge even began.
So stupid. So dumb.
Well, we all know Longstreet had opposed the charge from the beginning, convinced the charge would fail, which he was ultimately proved correct, and had his own plan that he would have preferred for a strategic movement around the Union left flank.
Wow. In his memoirs, he recalled telling Lee, General, I have been a soldier all my life. I have been with soldiers engaged in fights by couples, by squads, companies, regiments, divisions, and armies, and should know, as well as anyone, what soldiers can do. It is my opinion that no 15,000 men ever arrayed for battle can take that position. Longstreet wanted to avoid personally ordering the charge by attempting to pass the mantle onto Colonel Alexander, telling him that he should inform Pickett at the optimum time to begin the advance, based on his assessment as the Union artillery had been effectively silenced. He's like, how about you? You figure it out, bud. Right. You make the call.
Although he hadn't become aware of such a development, Alexander eventually notified Pickett that he was running dangerously short of ammo, sending the message, if you are coming at all, come at once, or I cannot give you proper support, but the enemy's fire has not slackened at all. At least 18 guns are still firing from the cemetery itself, he says. Pickett then asked Longstreet, General, shall I advance? Longstreet recalled in his memoirs, the effect to speak the order failed, and I could only indicate it by affirmative bow.
He couldn't say anything.
Longstreet made one final attempt to call off the assault. After his encounter with Pickett, he discussed the artillery situation with Alexander and was informed that Alexander did not have full confidence that all the enemy's guns were silenced and that the Confederate ammunition was almost exhausted. Longstreet ordered Alexander to stop Pickett, but the young colonel explained that replenishing his ammunition from the trains in the rear would take over an hour, and this delay would nullify any advantage the previous barrage had given him. The infantry assault went forward without the Confederate artillery close support that had been originally planned. Ooh.
Can't do that.
Could have probably used that.
The entire force that stepped off toward the Union positions at about 2 p.m. comprised about 12,500 men. Although the attack is popularly called a charge, the men marched deliberately in line, prepared to speed up and charge only when they were within a few hundred yards of the enemy. The line consisted of Pettigrew and Trimble on the left, Pickett on the right. The 9 brigades of men stretched over a mile long. The Confederates immediately encountered heavy artillery fire and were slowed by fences in their path. Fire from Lieutenant Colonel Freeman McGilvery's concealed artillery positions north of Little Round Top raked the Confederate right flank. Artillery fire from Cemetery Hill hit the left, while the center faced the cannons of the Second Corps with a Union artillery reserve in a second line behind. Dude, they're just getting hammered.
The ground between Seminary Ridge and Cemetery Ridge is slightly undulating, whatever that means, and the advancing troop periodically disappeared from the view of the Union cannoneers while advancing the nearly 3/4 of a mile across open fields to reach the Union line. Holy shit, dude, 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
As the three Confederate divisions advanced, awaiting Union soldiers began shouting, "Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg," in reference to the disastrous Union. I was just going to say, it reminded me of that.
Right.
The Union advance on the Confederate line during the 1862 Battle of Fredericksburg. If you remember, they were all the Confederates were behind that stone wall, just obliterating the Union.
Crazy shit. Shell and solid shot in the beginning turned to canister and musket fire as the Confederates came within 400 yards of the Union line. At this point, Confederate Union cohesion and morale began to break down. The last shelter before reaching the Union lines lay at 300 yards in the sunken depression of the Emmitsburg Road. Thousands of Confederates took to the ground there and refused to advance any further, many surrendering to Union troops after the battle. Over 2/3 of the initial force may have failed to make the final charge. Damn, dude, that's ridiculous. At contact, the mile-long front had shrunk to less than a half mile.
Wow.
As the men filled in gaps that appeared throughout the line and followed the natural tendency to move away from the flanking fire.
Right. On the left flank of the attack, Brockenbrau's brigade was devastated by artillery fire from Cemetery Hill. They were also subjected to a surprise musket fusillade from 8th Ohio Infantry Regiment. The 160 Ohioans firing from a single line so surprised Brockenbrau's Virginians, who were already demoralized by their losses to artillery fire, that they panicked and fled back to Seminary Ridge, crashing through Trimble's division and causing many of his men to bolt as well.
Oh, my.
The Ohioans followed up with a successful flanking attack on Davis's brigade, which was now the left flank of Pettigrew's division.
The survivors were subjected to increasingly artillery fire from Cemetery Hill. More than 1,600 rounds were fired at Pettigrew's men during their assault. This portion of the assault never advanced much further than the sturdy fence at the Emmitsburg Road. By this time, the Confederates were close enough to be fired on by artillery canister, and Alexander Hayes' division unleashed very effective musketry fire from behind 260 yards of stone wall. Oh, there's that stone wall. With every rifleman of the division lined up as many as 4 deep, exchanging places in line as they fired and then fell back to reload.
Nice.
That's perfect. Look at that.
In the process, deafening everybody that they're shooting next to. They were at once enveloped in a dense cloud of smoke and dust. Arms, heads, blankets, guns, and knapsacks were thrown and tossed into the clear air. A moan went up from the field, distinctly to be heard amid the storm of battle. So says Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Sawyer from the 8th Ohio.
Man. Trimble's division of 2 brigades followed Pettigrew's, but made poor progress. Confusing orders from Trimble caused Lane to send only 3.5 of his North Carolina regiments forward.
3.5?
Right. Renewed fire from the 8th Ohio and the onslaught of Hayes' riflemen prevented most of these men from getting past the Emmitsburg Road. If you guys ever watched the movie Gettysburg, this is they do this one in depth.
Right.
It's crazy. Scales' North Carolina brigade, led by Colonel William L.J. Lawrence, started with a heavier disadvantage. They had lost about 2/3 of their men on the 1st of July.
Wow.
They were also driven back, and Lawrence was wounded. The Union defenders also took casualties, but Hayes encouraged his men by riding back and forth just behind the line, shouting, "Hurrah, boys! We're giving them hell!" 2 horses were shot out from underneath them.
He just gets on another one.
Right.
On the right, he didn't care about his horses, apparently. No feelings whatsoever. On the right
Well, he
flank...
probably lost his original horse a long time ago.
On the right flank, Pickett's Virginians crossed the Emmitsburg Road and wheeled partially to the left to face northeast. They marched in 2 lines led by the brigades of Brigadier General James Kemper on the right, Brigadier General Richard Garnett on the left. Brigadier General Lewis Armistead's brigade followed closely behind them. As the division wheeled to the left, its right flank was exposed to McGilvery's guns and the front of Doubleday's Union division on Cemetery Ridge. Stannard's Vermont brigade marched forward, faced north, and delivered withering fire into the rear of Kemper's brigade.
It's ridiculous,
Jeez, dude.
At about this time, you'd think Lee'd have to be like, dude, we're done.
I don't even know if he's even over here.
At about this time, Hancock, who had been prominent in displaying himself on horseback to his men during the Confederate artillery bombardment, was wounded by a bullet striking the pommel of his saddle, entering his inner right thigh along with the wood fragments and large bent nail.
Holy shit, where the hell did the nail come from? Oh, it must have hit through like the fence or something?
Right. He refused evacuation to the rear until the battle was settled.
Oh, good for him. As Pickett's men advanced, they withstood the defensive fire of first Stannard's brigade, then Harrow's, and then Hall's, before approaching a minor salient in the Union center, a low stone wall taking an 80-yard right-angle turn known afterward as the Angle. It was defended by Brigadier General Alexander Webb's Philadelphia Brigade. Webb placed the 2 remaining guns of the severely wounded Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing's Battery A of the 4th U.S. Artillery at the front of his line at the stone fence with the 69th and 71st Pennsylvania regiments to defend the fence and the guns. The 2 guns and 940 men could not match the massive firepower that Hayes' division to the right had been able to unleash, though.
Ooh.
So?
Okay, well, at this time, 2 gaps open up in the Union line. The commander of the 71st Pennsylvania ordered his men to retreat when the Confederates came too close to the angle. South of the copse of trees, the men of the 59th New York, which is Hall's brigade, inexplicably bolted to the rear. In the latter case, this left Captain Andrew Cowan and his 1st New York Independent Artillery Battery to face the oncoming infantry.
Jeez.
Assisted personally by Artillery Chief Henry Hunt, Cowan ordered 5 guns to fire double canister simultaneously. The entire Confederate line to his front disappeared. The gap vacated by most of the 71st Pennsylvania, however, was more serious, leaving only a handful of the 71st, 268 men of the 69th Pennsylvania and Cushing's 2 3-inch rifle guns to receive the 25 to 3,000 men of Garnett and Armistead's brigades from the south as they began to cross the stone fence.
Oh, shit. Well, the Irishmen of the 69th Pennsylvania resisted fiercely in a melee of rifle fire, bayonets, and fists.
Ooh.
Oh, you know they're throwing some fists.
Right.
Webb, who was mortified that the 71st had retreated, brought the 72nd Pennsylvania forward. Initially, the regiment was hesitant to attack, this being due to the regiment not recognizing Webb as a brigadier general because he'd just been recently promoted.
Wow.
However, the 72nd moved forward after realizing their error, helping to plug the gap in the line.
Like, oh, shit. All right.
This guy's giving orders.
All right. During the fight, Lieutenant Cushing was moited as he shouted to his men, 3 bullets striking him in the 3rd in his mouth. The Confederates seized his 2 guns and turned them to face the Union troops. But they had no ammo to fire them. As more Union reinforcements arrived and charged into the breach, the position became untenable, and the Confederates began to slip away individually, with no senior officers remaining to call a formal retreat.
Well, the infantry assault lasted less than an hour. The support and attack by Wilcox and Lang on Pickett's right was never a factor. They did not approach the Union line until after Pickett was defeated, and their advance was quickly broken up by McGilvery's guns and the Vermont Brigade. While the Union lost about 1,500 killed and wounded, the Confederate casualty rate was over 50%. Pickett's division suffered 2,655 casualties, 498 killed, 643 wounded, 833 wounded and captured, and 681 captured unwounded. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, because they're walking in that open field and watching everybody just get blown to pieces.
Right.
It's stupid. Man, these guys. It's the most ridiculous ever seen, man. Wow. That and the Revolutionary War, both the same. Man. Pettigrew's losses are estimated to be about 2,700, with 470 killed, 1,893 wounded, and 337 captured. Trimble's 2 brigades lost 885, 155 killed, 650 wounded, 80 men captured. Wilcox's brigade reports losses of 200. Lang's about 400. Thus, the total losses during the attack were 6,555, of which at least 1,123 Confederates were moited. 4,019 were wounded, and a good number of the injured were also captured. Confederate prisoner totals are difficult to estimate from their reports. Union reports indicated that 3,750 men were captured.
Dude, 1,123 bodies just laying on the battlefield.
Ridiculous. And that's just Confederates.
Right. Well, Union, what? Maybe a couple hundred?
Probably 4 or 5.
Only 1,500 casualties total.
Right.
I doubt that many. The casualties were also high among the commanders of the charge. Trimble and Pettigrew were the most senior casualties of the day. Trimble lost a leg. Pettigrew received a minor wound to the hand, only to die from a bullet to the abdomen, suffered in a minor skirmish during the retreat to Virginia.
Oh, no.
Oh, jeez. In Pickett's division, 26 of the 40 field grade officers, which were majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels, were casualties, 12 killed or mortally wounded, 9 wounded, 4 wounded and captured, and 1 captured. All of his brigade commanders fell. Kemper was wounded seriously, captured by Union soldiers, rescued, and then captured again during the retreat to Virginia. Jeez. Garnett and Armistead were killed. Garnett had a previous leg injury and rode his horse during the charge, despite knowing that conspicuously riding a horse into heavy enemy fire would mean almost certain death.
Yeah,
he said, I got to lead my guys, man.
And that's sad.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on new episodes of Outlaws and Gunslingers or Battles of the American Civil War, right here on the Bang Dang Network. And don't forget to check out those playlists.